Is it aluminum or aluminium? And does it make any difference? We'll find out this week on Motoring 2003.
TSN's Motoring 2003 is brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oil, oils fine-tuned for different engines, and MIDAS, Total Car Care. We do that.
When Jaguar introduced the S-Type at the Birmingham Auto Show, it described it as the most important launch in the company's history. Why? Well, Jaguar was on the ropes until Ford came along, invested over $300 million, which allowed Jaguar to develop cars like the S-Type and the X-Type. But Jaguar also knew it had to prove itself to the bean counters at head office. Well, both cars have proven successful in the showroom. But you know, more importantly, what these cars did for this company was create a buzz. People were once again paying attention. Well, over the last few years, as you know, car companies have been stampeding us with all sorts of new product, and things have kind of settled down at Jaguar. Well, they're determined to get that attention back once again from consumers. And to do it, they're turning to a car that has been the backbone of this company, the XJ.
The English revere tradition. So from the very first Jaguar to the 1988 XJ6, Jaguars have been swift, extremely sure-footed, quick to respond, and able to stop on a penny.
The XJ is really Jaguar's flagship. We've sold more XJs than any other Jaguar in the history of the company. And this car really is the pinnacle in terms of the large premium segment in Canada. It's a terrific vehicle. It's stronger, faster, smarter, safer than any other Jaguar ever built. It's going to open itself up to a whole nother consumer base just because it's larger in every dimension than the prior car. It really sets the tone for the future of the brand, and it's critical in that respect.
Clearly, the first story here is the lightweight aluminium structure that we've done on the car. We recognized when we were putting the program together the need for improved performance and fuel economy, customers looking for more toys and technologies in the car, and that led us to the need to get a lighter vehicle. And the backbone of that really is the aluminium body shell, which we're very proud of. It's 40% lighter than the steel body shell, and that gives us something like a 500 or 600 pound advantage over some of our competitors. Clearly, it's not just about an aluminium body shell. We've got magnesium seats in the car. We've got a magnesium cross-car beam. In fact, every component in the car has been engineered to be lightweight. The powertrain's a 4.2 litre, same as in the new S-Type and the XK. But with the new XJ, we've made sure with the installation that it's extremely refined, and we've also worked very hard at the drivability with the powertrain to make sure that the car feels powerful, and there's a direct link between the throttle pedal and the engine.
We have a terrific product portfolio. It's all about the product. And what we now need to do is communicate that, hey, we are number one in sales satisfaction. We were number two in service satisfaction last year in Canada. We have high quality products that are relevant to the consumers out there. Jaguar's range now from $41,195 on an X-Type all the way up to $116,000, $120,000 on an XKR. So we have a broad range that can suit a lot of different consumers, and we just need people to come in and recognize that.
No question, aluminum is more expensive as a material than steel. We believe that in future the cost is going to come down. Clearly, we think the benefits are going to go up. The cost of repair clearly is crucial with this car, and we worked very hard. In fact, we've worked with the insurance industries worldwide because they have a lot of knowledge, obviously, on the cost of repair to ensure that the repair cost didn't go up over a steel car. We have a bolt-on front-end structure on the car specifically aimed at making it easy to repair the majority of crashes which occur on the front end of the car. This is aimed precisely at our traditional customer base, the guys that have bought the XJ in the past. Clearly, we're also out to win new customers. Move-ups both from the S-Type Jaguar and move-ins from BMW and Mercedes, those kind of guys. Also, we'd like to attract some customers directly across from cars like Mercedes S-Class, the BMW 7 Series, and also out of cars like Cadillac.
When I go to a movie with my kids or my wife, I count the number of Jags that I see in a parking lot, for example, versus my peer competition. When I'm driving back and forth on the road, I have a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old, and they know our model line well, and they'll scream, "Daddy, an X-Type," or "Daddy, an S-Type." And so we count our market share almost on a daily basis, and we really hope to continue to see our market presence build, because really the best marketing tool you have is cars on the road, and that builds relevance for the consumer.
Sometimes we just can't see the forest for the trees. More later on Kenzie's Corner.
This week on Test Drive, we put the TSX through its paces. And no, I'm not referring to that stuffy stock exchange. I'm referring to this car, Acura's newest. Now, it's based on the highly acclaimed European version of Honda's Accord. The TSX incorporates Honda's variable valve timing and lift electronic control, or VTEC system, but with a racy twist. This version mimics the operation of that used in the NSX's engine. It also incorporates variable valve timing, which puts the I in the 2.4 litres iVTEC designation. The work brings 200 ponies, 166 pounds-feet of torque at 4,500 RPM, and a quick tip-in. It also means a strong mid-range, and at the top end the TSX flies. Here the exhaust note changes just as the engine gets its second wind. Add to that Acura's 5-speed sequential sport shift automatic transmission, and things work together very nicely. Bonus marks for the fast shift between first and second gears. At 0.7 seconds, it's as quick as a manual box. You know, Acura have done an awful lot right with this TSX, and the suspension is one of the highlights. It allows this car to romp through the pylons with a flat attitude, and it's primarily down to the very sophisticated suspension. It keeps the tyres on the tarmac where they do their best work. Better yet, when you're out on the highway, well, this thing is as comfortable as it is capable. In short, a job very well done. The suspension sophistication boils down to double wishbones up front, a multi-link rear design, anti-roll bars at both ends, and a large cross-car strut brace. The latter helps prevent the body from twisting whenever the car is pushed through a corner. Not only does the design keep the TSX flat through a corner, it resists lift under hard acceleration and nosedive under heavy braking, which is just as well as the large four-wheel discs scrub off speed quickly and without the usual fade. It also includes a full anti-lock system that keeps its nose out of day-to-day driving. The other place the TSX really does shine is the interior. To begin with, these seats are very comfortable and supply superior support. The driving position is very good, and the steering wheel, well, it communicates what's happening at the front tyre very effectively. The other thing, the ergonomics are just about perfect with the exception of the sunroof control. For some strange reason, Acura insist on burying it down here rather than placing it up on the roof. However, I've saved the best for last, and that is the quality of the fit and finish. Not only is it very attractive, the crash pad has a soft touch feel, and it's made out of one piece. That means you don't get that horrible cobbled together look. In short, interior design doesn't get much better. Rounding out the electronic package is Vehicle Stability Assist. Now, if the system detects either understeer, oversteer or wheel spin, the anti-lock brakes are applied to the appropriate wheel as the electronic throttle lifts out of the gas. Pressed through the pylons, the TSX maintains a high degree of lateral stability. When the tyres did begin to give up and slide into understeer, the VSA stepped in to right the minor wrong in a near seamless manner. Being less intrusive than some other systems means the TSX is more forgiving at the limit than most, which is definitely a good thing. You know, about the only place the TSX doesn't quite live up to the rest of the car is the back seat area. As room back here, well, it's a little cramped, primarily because the back seat was designed for 2 passengers and not 3. The reason is simple. The squab is domed and hard, and this, believe it or not, is supposed to be the backrest. Even the kids complained about sitting here. Elsewhere, the TSX's sporty personality is backed up by dual-stage front airbags, side bags and side air curtains, as well as high-intensity discharge headlights. You know, an awful lot of people have asked me, why on earth would you buy an Acura TSX when you can go out and buy a 240 horsepower V6 Honda Accord for about the same coin? Drive the TSX, and well, the answer becomes blatantly obvious. On the one hand, the Honda Accord is best described as a 4-door boulevardier. This car, on the other, well, it's a true sports sedan of the first order.
Our MIDAS Tip of the Week concerns keeping tabs on your oil pressure gauge. If your vehicle is equipped with an engine oil pressure gauge, what it's doing is that gauge is monitoring the output of the mechanical pump inside your engine that produces the oil pressure necessary to lubricate the engine. Now, it not only produces the pressure, but it circulates the oil around inside the engine. Now, one thing you don't want to do is rely on that oil pressure gauge as an indication of how much oil is in the engine. You need to regularly check with the dipstick the engine oil level, because the engine oil pump picks up the oil from the very bottom of the oil pan, and it will make pressure with only 1 liter of oil in the engine. This vehicle, for example, holds over 5 liters of oil, and you've got to have a full engine oil supply in order to have proper lubrication under all operating circumstances. However, here's some of the readings that you're going to see on a normal engine oil pressure gauge. First of all, when you come out to your vehicle in the morning, you're likely going to see the last reading that was displayed by that gauge. Now, as you turn the key on, the gauge will usually zero, and it's that meter sweep that keeps that delicate mechanism in the oil pressure gauge working properly. Now, as you crank the engine over and it starts up, you'll get a reading on that gauge. And when you first start the engine with a cold engine and cold oil, you're going to get a reading that's on the high side of your scale. 3/4 of the scale is normally what you're going to see when you first start the engine. As you rev the engine up, you'll see an even higher reading, and that's normal again. Increasing speed means increasing oil pressure. Now, engine oil pressure will fluctuate with temperature a lot too, so as the engine warms up, you're going to get somewhat lower readings. You'll also see the reading fluctuate if you switch grades of oil. You'll have a higher pressure reading with thick oils like 10W40 or 20W50. You'll have a lower reading under all operating circumstances with thinner oils like 5W20 or 5W30. These are normal situations. What you should be looking for is adequate oil pressure and response of that gauge to engine speed and to temperature. That's your MIDAS Tip of the Week.
This is our vision. This is the Cadillac 16.
The Cadillac 16 means a lot to a lot of people at a lot of levels. People who don't even own Cadillacs, writing emails and sending faxes saying, it made me so proud to see Cadillac make this statement. And let's not let the Germans and the Japanese run away with the ultra-luxury market. It's important for Cadillac to plant the flag at the top of the market. So it almost triggered feelings of national pride, as I say, even people who own foreign makes. It's a demonstration to our own employees of where we want to take Cadillac and what Cadillac means to us and what Cadillac has to mean to the motoring public generally again. I think it's a brilliant design and just such a wonderful combination of the crisp lines that have marked Cadillac's recent styling, but with some beautiful, beautiful flow and beautiful curved surfaces in between the hard edges, and of course such a beautiful proportion. Really a heroic looking car. And when you look at it, you could take the badges off and ask almost any guy who knows cars around the world and say, badges are off, what make is it? Everybody would say Cadillac.
Needless to say, the new XJ8 comes fully loaded, but a couple of things you might be interested in. First, the trunk. It is, according to the company, the biggest trunk ever on a Jaguar. And inside, it is a carryover from other models, but I still think it's pretty cool. It's the parking brake. You don't have one of those awkward handles. Instead, it's simply a matter of flipping the button up, the brake goes on, and then when you put the vehicle into drive, the parking brake automatically goes off. Does all the work for you. How about that? All right, let's head to the Quaker State Garage and join Bill Gardiner.
Don't get me started on this stuff. I'll tell you, if you can't apply an emergency brake and release it, you should turn in your driver's license. We'll just leave it at that, okay? I want to talk about something that you do need quite a bit of force to work with, and that's a belt tensioner. Now, for about the last 15 model years of cars, starting somewhere in the mid-'80s on domestic and import cars and trucks, most of these vehicles have had what we call a belt tensioner, a spring-loaded tensioner that automatically applies the requisite tension to the fan belt. And in most cases, we're talking about a single belt, a serpentine belt that drives all accessories. Gone are the days of having to use a pry bar and a wrench or a socket to lock 2 or 3 different adjustments on numerous belts. That's what was done on the older cars. Now, in spite of this vehicle having 365,000 kilometers, the belt tensioner is still in good shape. It's nice and square and straight on the pulleys. There's no gap in here. It's working just fine. Now, we'll shut it off. Now, one thing you got to make really sure about if you're working on one of these deals is you've got to make absolutely sure key out of the ignition. And with all the remote starters out there these days, I take off the negative battery cable as well before you initiate any work. So there's absolutely no chance that thing can crank over and or start up while you're working on this system. Now, when you're working on a belt tensioner, you usually need a special tool or at least a socket or some kind of a wrench to relieve the tension. There's quite a bit of tension in this housing. In this housing here is the spring that applies tension to the belt. And what you do is lever it back with the proper tool, get the belt out of there, then you let the tension go off this belt tensioner. In most cases, you've just got a single bolt holding the belt tensioner onto the vehicle. Now, the trick here is that on most vehicles, the belt tensioner, especially if it's a front-wheel drive vehicle, is installed in an area where it's not easy to get to. So in spite of the fact there's only one belt or one bolt involved, it's not an easy deal to get off. This is a rear-wheel drive pickup truck, so everything's really easy to do. What you do is just loosen off the bolt, and once you get that single bolt moved out of there, there's your entire belt tensioner assembly. There's the bolt that holds it on. There's a little dowel peg that indexes it to the engine bracket and locks it into the right position. And inside this metal pulley is a bearing. You can hear that this one's a little bit noisy. Some of these pulleys are metal and some of them are nylon. In spite of the high mileage on this vehicle, this tensioner was still quite serviceable. Matter of fact, I'm going to put it right back on there in just a minute. 365,000 K on it. It'll probably be on there for $500,000. But you know, Murphy's Law being what it is, because this one's easy to change, it'll probably never fail. The ones that fail are the ones that are hard to change, and that was the case with this Pontiac Grand Am I was working on the other day. It was a 96 model. I think it had about 160,000 on it, and the tensioner had completely come apart. There's all the parts that were left when I was done. There's a lot of tension on that spring as well, so you've got to have the proper tools to release the tension safely, and you've got to have the proper tools to get at the fasteners that hold this thing on. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardiner for Motoring 2003.
Now, please don't get me wrong on this one. Any premature death is a tragedy. Now, I might be the only engineer in history to graduate without taking a course in statistics, so maybe I'm even more inclined than most to look at things by the numbers. Take, for example, the SARS epidemic in Toronto recently. Now, this was a bug that we didn't know anything about. We didn't know how to cure it. We didn't know how to control it. It created huge panic. Now, maybe this epidemic pointed out some flaws in Canada's public health system. Maybe if they're fixed, it'll make us all safer in the long run. But 20 people died of SARS in this time frame. One of them was a 99-year-old man who was already in hospital with a serious illness. In that same time frame, on average, we'll kill about 250 people in traffic crashes in this country. Now, the federal government gave the City of Toronto $1 million, not to help cure SARS, but to help rehabilitate the city's public image because of all the negative publicity. Companies bought huge chunks of the Sky Dome so people could get discounted tickets to the Blue Jays, again, to encourage tourism. Do you think maybe some of that money directed at, say, advanced driver training might save even more lives? Now, my heart goes out to the victims and the families of SARS. But my heart also goes out to the families of those 6 kids, some as young as the age 12, who were killed in one single car crash in British Columbia in that same time frame. They're just as dead. Is it too much to ask for a little perspective? I'm Jim Kenzie.
Although Graham will take a closer look at a future test drive, first impressions of the new XJ8, this car is hot. And thanks to the lightweight aluminum body, it's actually nimble on the highway. Not something I would have said about previous generations. Now, before we go, a little trivia for you. You ever wondered what XJ stands for? Well, back in the mid-60s when they were first developing this vehicle, internally it stood for Experimental Jaguar. So there you go. Well, that's it for this week. We'll see you next time out as we continue to bring you more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
I open up the hood and let it idle for anywhere from 2 to 10 minutes. Everybody thinks I'm crazy, but that's why I've got 412,000 kilometers on my original turbo.
TSN's Motoring 2003 has been brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oil. Oils fine-tuned for different engines. And MIDAS, Total Car Care. We do that.